6 months had passed since the night the alien terraforming network awakened. New Georgia had changed in ways nobody could have predicted. Where there was once harsh red soil, green fields now stretched to the horizon. The alien bacteria had transformed the landscape, making it perfect for growing earth crops while preserving the native plant life. Hanul stood at the front of a crowded classroom in the newly built Agricultural Research Center. Farmers from other colonies filled every seat, eager to learn about the revolutionary farming techniques developed on New Georgia. But the student that made her most proud sat in the front row, Billy Joe Thompson. The key to success, Hanul explained, pointing to the glowing hydroponic tank beside her, is working with the alien bacteria instead of against it. The ancient system doesn't replace traditional farming, it makes it better. Thompson raised his hand, something that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. Might be helpful if I showed them how we adjusted the planting schedule to match the bacteria's growth cycles, he suggested. Hanul smiled and gestured him forward. Thompson walked to the front, his boots no longer caked with red dirt. His farm had become a testing ground for combining old and new methods, and he took pride in sharing what he had learned. First thing you got to understand, he told the class, is that everything I knew about farming had to change. Wasn't easy. But sometimes the best growth happens when you're willing to try new things. After class, Ho Newell walked with Dr. Yenji Kang through the research center's main greenhouse. The building was massive, filled with both traditional soil plots and hydroponic systems. All of them glowed with the now familiar blue light of the alien bacteria. The Interstellar Scientific Council is amazed by our progress, Dr. Kang said, checking readings on her tablet. Crop yields are up 400%. The food tastes better, has more nutrients, and stays fresh longer. Other colonies are begging to implement our methods. Hanul touched a nearby plant, feeling its strong, healthy leaves. And the native species. Thriving. Dr. Kang said excitedly. The bacteria doesn't just help earth plants, it strengthens all life forms. We've discovered 3 new varieties of edible native plants that the bacteria made safe for human consumption. They reached the section where Namgi Park was giving a tour to officials from Earth. The colony administrator looked younger these days, energized by New Georgia's success. Our colony has become a model for human-alien cooperation, Namgi was saying. Even though the civilization that built this system is long gone, they left us a gift that proves different species can work together for the benefit of all. Hanul heard the deeper message in his words. If different species could help each other across the gulf of time and space, surely humans could learn to overcome their own prejudices and work together. The morning sun cast long shadows across Ho Newell Kim's hydroponic farm as she checked the nutrient levels in her growing tanks. The clear tubes filled with flowing water stretched as far as the eye could see inside her massive greenhouse. Thousands of plants grew without soil, their roots dangling in the mineral-rich water. The sight always made her smile. Hanul wiped sweat from her dark forehead and adjusted her work gloves. Even early in the morning, New Georgia's stronger sun made the greenhouse hot. The colony world's higher gravity also meant she had to work harder for every movement. But she didn't mind. This was her dream, after all. Growth rates are up another 12%, she said to herself, reading the numbers on her tablet. The new mineral mix is working better than expected. A loud bang made her jump. Someone was pounding on the greenhouse door. Hanul already knew who it would be before she opened it. Her neighbor, Billy Joe Thompson, stood there in his dusty overalls. His face was red with anger, just like it had been the last 3 times he visited. Your fancy water-growing nonsense is killing my crops, he shouted, pointing at his fields across the road. Ain't natural. What you're doing here? Hanul took a deep breath. She had dealt with people like Thompson her whole life. People who didn't like change, and especially didn't like change coming from someone who looked like her. Mr. Thompson, she said calmly, my hydroponic system is completely closed. Nothing from my farm could possibly affect your fields. Don't you try to confuse me with your scientist talk, Thompson spat. I know what I'm seeing. My daddy farmed this land the proper way, in good Georgia soil, and his daddy before him. Then you show up with your tubes and chemicals, and suddenly my crops are dying. Hernuel looked past him at his withering cornfields. The plants were yellow and sickly looking. But she knew it wasn't because of her farm. Thompson refused to adapt to New Georgia's different conditions. He farmed exactly like his family had on Earth, even though this was an alien world with different soil and stronger gravity. I'd be happy to look at your soil samples, she offered. Maybe I could help. I don't need help from someone like you. Thompson cut her off. Just wait until the next colony council meeting. They'll see what you're really up to. He stormed off, kicking up red dust with each angry step. Hernuel sighed and went back to her work. The colony needed her crops. With Earth so far away, the colonists depended on local farms for food. Her hydroponic techniques grew more food using less water and energy than traditional farming. But some people, like Thompson, couldn't accept new ways of doing things. Later that day, Hernuel walked through her greenhouse, checking on different growing sections. The leafy greens were doing especially well: lettuce, spinach, and local vegetables that were similar to earth crops. The plants grew in neat rows, their leaves a healthy deep green. A soft blue glow caught her eye. It came from one of the nutrient tanks near the back of the greenhouse. Hernuel frowned. She had noticed the strange glow a few times before, always at night. But now she could see it even in daylight. She took a sample of the glowing water and added it to her list of things to test. Just then, her tablet beeped with a message. It was from Namdi Park, the colony administrator. Hernuel, I wanted to warn you. Thompson has been talking to other farmers, spreading rumors about your operation. He's filed a formal complaint for the next council meeting. I know it's nonsense, but I'll have to investigate if he brings it up officially. Just wanted you to be prepared. Namdi. Hernuel's shoulders tensed. She had worked so hard to build this farm. After growing up in poverty on Earth, she had studied agriculture and biology, earning her degrees while working multiple jobs. When the chance came to join the New Georgia colony, she had spent her life savings to buy this land and set up her hydroponic system. Now Thompson's Prejudice threatened to destroy everything she had built. But she wouldn't let that happen. She had dealt with people like him before, and she would handle this the same way, with patience, professionalism, and proof. A movement outside caught her attention. Through the greenhouse walls, she saw Thompson standing at the edge of his property, watching her farm with suspicious eyes. As the sun set behind him, the blue glow from her nutrient tanks became more visible. Thompson pointed at the light and shook his head before walking away. Hernuel knew the next few weeks would be challenging. But she also knew she was right. Her farming methods worked, and she had the data to prove it. The colony needed her crops, especially with Thompson's farm producing less each season. She would face whatever accusations he made at the council meeting with facts and evidence. She looked at the glowing nutrient tank again. Maybe she should speed up her testing of that strange blue substance. She had a feeling it might be important somehow. But that would have to wait until tomorrow. Right now, she had crops to tend to, and every plant in her care was counting on her. As night fell over New Georgia, the blue glow in Hernuel's greenhouse grew stronger. Unknown to both Hernuel and Thompson, they were standing on the edge of a discovery that would change not just their colony, but humanity's understanding of agriculture itself. Their conflict was about to become much bigger than a simple farming dispute. The stars came out one by one, Earth's sun just a distant point of light among them. Hernuel's greenhouse glowed like a beacon in the darkness, while Thompson's fields lay in shadow. Two different approaches to farming, two different visions of humanity's future among the stars, separated by a dirt road and centuries of prejudice. But change was coming to New Georgia, whether Thompson liked it or not. And it would start right here, in a greenhouse full of glowing blue light, tended by a woman who had crossed the stars to build something new. The colony council meeting hall was packed full. Newell Kim sat in the front row, her back straight and her face calm, even though her heart was racing. All around her, farmers and colonists whispered and stared. Some gave her encouraging smiles, but others looked at her with suspicion. Nam Gi Park, the colony administrator, called the meeting to order. He stood at the podium, his grey hair neat and his uniform pressed. The council chamber fell quiet except for the soft hum of air filters. Before we discuss regular business, Nam Jai said, Mr. Thompson has requested time to present a serious accusation. He didn't look happy about it. Mr. Thompson, you have the floor. Billy Joe Thompson walked to the front of the room. His boots were caked with red dirt, and his hands were rough from working his fading fields. But his voice was strong and angry. Good people of New Georgia, he began, we got a poison snake in our midst. He pointed at her Newell. That woman that is destroying our farms with her unnatural methods. Murmurs filled the room. Thompson pulled out his tablet and showed pictures of his dying crops. The corn stalks were yellow and bent, nothing like the healthy plants in Ho Newell's greenhouse. Look at this, Thompson shouted. My family's been farming for generations. We never had trouble like this on Earth. Then she shows up with her fancy water-growing setup, and suddenly everything goes wrong. He switched to a nighttime picture of Ho Newell's greenhouse. The mysterious blue glow was clearly visible through the walls. And what's this weird light? I've seen alien tech before. This ain't normal. She's poisoning our soil with something from another world. Mark my words. Newell started to stand up, but Nam Jai raised his hand. Miss Kim will have a chance to respond. Please continue, Mr. Thompson. Thompson showed more pictures. Close-ups of his sick plants, soil samples, even satellite images showing the difference between his brown fields and Ho Newell's green greenhouse. 3 other farms near her have reported problems, he said. This ain't no coincidence. I demand the council shut down her operation and test her whole farm for alien contamination. When Thompson finished, Nam Jai looked tired. He had hoped New Georgia would be different from Earth, free from old prejudices. But humans had brought their biases with them across the stars. Miss Kim, Nam Jai said, would you like to respond to these accusations? Newell walked to the podium. She had prepared for this, loading her own data onto the display screen. My hydroponic system is completely sealed, she explained, showing diagrams of her greenhouse. No water or nutrients can leak out. It's actually designed to use less water than traditional farming. She switched to charts showing her production numbers. My farm provides 30% of the colony's fresh vegetables. We test every batch for safety. She looked at Thompson. The problems with your crops started before I even built my greenhouse. But Thompson jumped up. That's not true. Everything was fine until... Mr. Thompson, Nam Jai cut him off. Please wait your turn. Newell showed soil analysis reports. The real problem is that earth farming methods don't work well on New Georgia. Our soil is different. The gravity is stronger. We need new approaches, like your alien light show. Thompson interrupted again. What's really in those tanks of yours? The room erupted in arguments. Some colonists defended Newell, pointing out how her farm helped feed the colony. Others sided with Thompson, saying traditional farming had worked for thousands of years. Nam Gi banged his gavel for order. Enough. These are serious accusations that require investigation. He turned to a young woman sitting with the council. Inspector Song My-yoon will conduct a full review of both farms. Until then, I expect everyone to stay calm and avoid spreading rumors. Song Mai stood up. She was new to the colony, recently arrived from Earth's Korean Administrative Zone. Her job was to investigate disputes between colonists, but she had never handled anything like this. I'll begin inspections tomorrow, she said. I'll need full access to both properties and all farming records. Newell nodded. She had nothing to hide. But her stomach tightened when she thought about the glowing blue substance in her tanks. She still hadn't figured out what it was. After the meeting, Newell walked quickly to her truck. But Thompson's voice stopped her in the parking lot. "Think you're clever, don't you?" he said. "Hiding behind your fancy charts and numbers. But I know what I seen. That blue light ain't natural, and I'm gonna prove it." "Mr. Thompson," Newell said firmly, "I've offered to help you understand why your crops are failing. That offer still stands." "I don't need help from—" He stopped himself, but Newell knew what he meant to say. She'd heard it all her life. "From someone like me," she finished for him. "Someone different from you. Someone who believes in science and progress." Thompson's face got red, but before he could respond, Song Mai appeared beside them. "Is there a problem here?" the inspector asked. "No problem," Thompson growled. "Just having a friendly chat about farming." He walked away, but Newell saw him glance back at her with suspicious eyes. That night, Newell couldn't sleep. She sat in her greenhouse, watching the blue glow pulse gently in the nutrient tanks. The light seemed stronger now, almost like it was responding to her presence. She took more samples, running them through every test she could think of. The blue substance wasn't harmful. In fact, the plants growing in those tanks were doing better than anywhere else. But what was it? Through the greenhouse walls, she saw lights on in Thompson's house. He was probably up too, planning his next move. Newell knew the investigation would show she wasn't poisoning anything. But would that be enough to change Thompson's mind? Or would his prejudice blind him to the truth, just like it blinded him to why his own crops were really failing? The next few weeks would test them both. And somewhere in her glowing tanks, a mystery waited to be solved. One that would change everything they thought they knew about farming on alien worlds. Inspector Song Mai-yoon stood in the middle of Thompson's fading cornfield, looking carefully at the sickly yellow plants. The strong gravity of New Georgia made her sample collection kit feel extra heavy as she knelt to take soil readings. It was her third day of investigation, and things weren't adding up. "Tell me again about your farming methods, Mr. Thompson," she said, brushing red dirt off her knees as she stood up. Thompson puffed up with pride. "Same ways my family's used for 4 generations. We plant according to the seasons, use good old earth fertilizers, and let nature do the rest." Song Mai made notes on her tablet. "And you haven't adapted your methods for New Georgia's conditions." "Don't need to," Thompson said firmly. "Proper farming is proper farming. Don't matter what planet you're on." But Song Mai's soil tests told a different story. The ground was too acidic for earth crops, and the stronger gravity made it harder for roots to grow deep. Thompson's earth-style farming was slowly poisoning his own soil. Later that day, Song Mai visited Newell's greenhouse. The difference was striking. Healthy plants grew in neat rows, their roots hanging in clear tubes of flowing water. The mysterious blue glow was stronger now, especially in the back sections. "The substance appeared about 3 months ago," Newell explained, showing Song Mai her records. "At first, I thought it was some kind of algae, but it's like nothing I've ever seen before." Song Mai took samples of the glowing water. "And the plants in these tanks grow better. 30% faster, with higher nutrient content," Newell said. "I've tested the blue substance thoroughly. It's not harmful. But I still can't identify exactly what it is." That night, Song Mai stayed late in her office, reviewing data from both farms. She had expected a simple dispute between neighbors, but her investigation was uncovering something much bigger. She created a map showing problem areas in Thompson's fields. Then she overlaid it with readings from Newell's greenhouse. A pattern emerged that made her sit up straight in her chair. The next morning, Song Mai called both farmers to her office. She also invited Nam-gi Park, the colony administrator. Thompson arrived first, giving Newell an angry look when she walked in. "Thank you all for coming," Song Mai began. "I've discovered something important." She showed them her map on the big screen. "Look at this pattern. The blue substance in Ms. Kim's greenhouse follows specific lines and curves. These same lines continue under Mr. Thompson's property, but they're dead zones where nothing grows." "See," Thompson shouted. "Her poison is spreading underground." "No," Song Mai said firmly. "These lines existed before either of you started farming here. They're part of something much older." She zoomed out the map. "They form a grid pattern that covers this entire region. I believe we're looking at ancient alien technology, some kind of terraforming system." The room went quiet. Nam Jai leaned forward, studying the map carefully. "Are you saying there was an alien civilization here before us?" "Yes," Song Mai said. "And they left behind a network designed to help plants grow. The blue substance in Ms. Kim's greenhouse? It's not contamination. It's beneficial bacteria that's part of this ancient system." She turned to Thompson. "Your aggressive pesticides have been killing these helpful bacteria in your soil. That's why your crops are failing. Ms. Kim's hydroponic system actually allowed the bacteria to thrive, which is why her plants are doing so well." Thompson shook his head. "That's crazy talk. You expect me to believe some dead aliens are helping her farm?" "The evidence is clear," Song Mai said. She showed them microscope images of the blue bacteria. "These organisms are perfectly adapted to New Georgia's conditions. They help plants deal with the stronger gravity and different soil chemistry. They're not a threat. They're exactly what we need to farm successfully here." Hanul looked amazed. "So that's why the plants in those tanks grow so much better. The bacteria helps them absorb nutrients more efficiently." Namjae stood up excitedly. "This could revolutionize farming on New Georgia. We need to study this system further. Miss Kim, would you be willing to?" "Now hold on," Thompson interrupted. "You can't just—" But he was cut off by a sudden commotion outside. One of Song Mi's assistant investigators burst into the office. "Inspector, something's happening at the farms," he said breathlessly. "The ground, it's glowing." They all rushed outside. In the distance, they could see it, lines of blue light spreading across the fields like glowing veins. The ancient terraforming network was waking up. "What did you do?" Thompson demanded, turning to Honule. "Nothing," she said, watching the lights with wonder. "The system must be responding to our discovery. Maybe it was waiting for us to understand what it was." Song Mi's tablet was going crazy with readings. "The bacteria are multiplying rapidly, spreading through the soil, but only in areas where they haven't been killed off by pesticides." They watched as the glowing lines grew brighter, forming patterns across the landscape. In Honule's greenhouse, the blue glow pulsed in sync with the lights outside. It was beautiful and a little frightening. A message from an ancient civilization written in living light. Namgi pulled out his communicator. "I need to contact the Interstellar Scientific Council immediately. This is bigger than our colony. This discovery could change how we farm on every new world we settle." Thompson stared at the glowing lines that stopped dead at the edge of his property. His face showed a mix of emotions: anger, fear, and maybe, just maybe, a hint of understanding. Hanul stepped closer to him. "Mr. Thompson, I meant what I said before. I'm happy to help you restore your soil. With this ancient system and our modern knowledge working together, we could grow things better than either of our ancestors ever dreamed possible." The light show continued as the sun set, casting everything in a soft blue glow. It was a new dawn for New Georgia, if they were willing to embrace it. The question was, could people like Thompson let go of their old prejudices and accept this new way forward? Song Mai closed her investigation notebook. The case wasn't just about farming anymore. It was about humanity's ability to adapt, to learn from the past, both their own and that of others who had come before them. The next few days would show whether they were ready for that lesson. Night had fallen over New Georgia, but nobody in the colony was sleeping. The blue lights of the ancient terraforming network lit up the landscape like glowing rivers. Scientists from the colony's research station were everywhere, taking readings and samples. News of the discovery had spread fast, and everyone wanted to see the alien technology for themselves. Hanul stood in her greenhouse, talking with Dr. Yun Jikang, who had arrived from the Interstellar Scientific Council an hour ago. The doctor's eyes were wide with excitement as she examined the glowing nutrient tanks. "This bacteria is remarkable," Dr. Kang said, looking at samples under a portable microscope. "It doesn't just help plants grow, it actively changes the soil chemistry to match what the plants need. The aliens who built this system must have been master bioengineers." Hanul nodded, but her attention was elsewhere. Through the greenhouse walls, she could see Thompson's dark house. He hadn't been seen since the discovery, and she was worried. People who felt cornered sometimes did desperate things. Her concern proved right. Just after midnight, alarms went off in her greenhouse. Hanul rushed from her house, still pulling on her boots. The security cameras showed someone inside, moving between the hydroponic tanks. "Thompson," she called out as she entered the greenhouse. "I know you're in here." She found him at the back of the building, near the tanks where the blue glow was strongest. He had a large container in his hands, and the smell of chemicals filled the air. "Stay back," Thompson warned, his voice shaking. "I'm gonna end this alien nonsense once and for all." Hanul saw the label on the container. It was a powerful pesticide, strong enough to kill every living thing in her tanks. "Think about what you're doing," she said carefully. "You'll destroy years of research." "Research?" Thompson laughed bitterly. "You got everyone fooled with your fancy science talk. But I know the truth. Aliens helping us farm. That's against God's plan." "The aliens aren't helping us farm," Hanul said, taking a slow step forward. "They left us tools, just like your great-grandfather left you his farming knowledge. We can choose to learn from them or ignore them. But destroying things won't change the truth." Thompson's hands trembled on the pesticide container. "My daddy always said farming was honest work. Simple work. Now everything's changing so fast. These lights, this bacteria, all this science stuff, where does it end?" "Change isn't always bad," Hanul said softly. "Your ancestors changed things too. They bred better crops, invented new tools, learned to work with nature instead of against it. That's all we're doing now, just on a bigger scale." She was almost within reach of the container now. "You're a good farmer, Mr. Thompson. You know how to read the land, how to time the seasons. We need those skills. But we also need to learn new ways if we're going to succeed on this world." Thompson looked at the glowing tanks, then at his hands holding the pesticide. For a moment, Hanul thought she had reached him, but then his face hardened. "No," he said. "Better to end it now before." He lifted the container to pour it into the nearest tank. Hanul lunged forward to stop him. In their struggle, they knocked against the tank's control panel. Suddenly, the blue glow intensified dramatically. The light spread rapidly through all the tanks, then down into the floor. Outside, the glowing lines in the ground pulsed brighter and brighter. A humming sound filled the air, growing louder by the second. "What did you do?" Thompson shouted, dropping the pesticide container. "I didn't," Hanul began, but her words were cut off as the floor began to vibrate. All across the colony, the ancient network was activating. The glowing lines spread and connected, forming complex patterns that hadn't been visible before. From above, it looked like a giant circuit board made of light. Dr. Kang burst into the greenhouse with her team. "The entire system is powering up," she exclaimed. "It's not just a farming network, it's terraforming the whole region." They watched in awe as new lines of blue light shot up from the ground like fountains, forming arcs of energy over the fields. The dying plants in Thompson's farm began to glow faintly, their leaves straightening as the alien bacteria worked to heal the damaged soil. "Impossible," Thompson whispered, his face lit by the blue light. All his anger seemed to drain away, replaced by wonder. Hanul touched one of the glowing arcs. It felt warm and alive. "Not impossible," she said. "Just new. Different. Like me being here, farming in my own way." The light show continued for hours. When dawn finally came, New Georgia had changed. The harsh red soil was softer, richer. Plants that had been struggling to grow now stood tall and green. The alien network had done in one night what might have taken human farmers years to achieve. Thompson sat on the greenhouse floor, looking out at his transformed fields. "I've been a fool," he said quietly. "Blaming you, fighting against new ideas. All because I was scared of change." Hanul sat beside him. "Fear is natural, but we can learn to move past it." Dr. Kang was practically dancing with excitement as she checked her readings. "This is revolutionary. The bacteria doesn't just help plants grow. It's gradually changing the entire ecosystem to better support Earth-type agriculture. But it works with existing life forms instead of replacing them." She turned to Hanul and Thompson. "We'll need both of you to help us understand this system. Mr. Thompson, your knowledge of traditional farming could help us understand how to blend these methods. And Miss Kim, your hydroponic expertise is crucial to managing the bacteria." Thompson looked surprised at being included. He glanced at Hanul, then slowly nodded. "Reckon I got some learning to do," he said. If you're willing to teach me." Hanul smiled. "We can learn together. After all, nobody's ever farmed quite like this before." Outside, the blue glow had faded to a gentle shimmer in the soil. But the change it represented was just beginning. Not just for farming, but for the people of New Georgia. Sometimes it took an alien miracle to help humans see past their differences and grow together, like plants reaching toward the same sun. Outside the research center, she found Thompson working in the demonstration garden. He had changed in the past 6 months, though his accent was still pure Georgia. He looked up as she approached. "Never thought I'd say this," he said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "But I'm glad I was wrong about you. About a lot of things." Hanul knelt down beside him, checking the soil moisture. "Change isn't easy. It takes courage to admit when we're wrong and try new ways." "Been thinking about my daddy," Thompson said quietly. "He always said farming was about tradition. But he also told me that a good farmer learns from every season. Reckon he'd be proud to see us learning from folk who farmed this land millions of years before us." A group of school children ran past, heading for their daily farming lesson. The class was a mix of all backgrounds, each child carrying a small plant they had grown themselves. They waved to Hanul and Thompson, who had become something of local celebrities. "Miss Kim," one little girl called out, "my tomato plant is glowing. Is that good?" "That's wonderful," Hanul answered. "It means the bacteria is helping it grow strong." "Like having a million tiny alien friends," Thompson added with a smile that would have shocked his former self. Later that evening, Hanul walked through her original greenhouse. She had kept it exactly as it was, a reminder of where everything started. The blue glow was stronger now, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. Through the walls, she could see the lights of the research center, where scientists and farmers worked together late into the night. Beyond that, the glowing lines of the terraforming networks spread across the colony like a star map on the ground. Her tablet beeped with a message from Earth's agricultural ministry. They wanted her to speak at a conference about implementing New Georgia's methods on other colony worlds. They also wanted Thompson to come. His experience in transitioning from traditional to hybrid farming had proven invaluable. Hanul thought about how far they had come. From accusations and anger to partnership and progress. The aliens who built the terraforming network couldn't have known who would eventually find their system. They simply left their knowledge for others to find, trusting that someday someone would understand and learn from it. A knock at the greenhouse door interrupted her thoughts. It was Thompson, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might be here," he said, handing her a cup. "Always did work too late." They stood together, watching the glowing tanks bubble softly. The same tanks that Thompson had once tried to poison now provided food for thousands. "Got word from the council," Thompson said. "They found similar networks on 3 other colony worlds. Seems like our alien friends were busy. They were preparing for a future they'd never see," Newell replied. "Helping people they'd never meet." Thompson nodded thoughtfully. "Kind of like us now, I suppose. Everything we're learning here, all the changes we're making, it's not just for us. It's for everybody who comes after." Outside, New Georgia's sun was setting, but the blue glow of the alien network lit the night like endless rivers of stars. It was a reminder that the greatest discoveries happen when people are willing to look past their differences and learn from each other, even if those others came from different worlds or different times. The future of farming on New Georgia was no longer about Earth traditions versus alien technology or old ways versus new methods. It was about growing together, learning from the past while building something new. And in that growth, both the land and its people had found a way to thrive.